So Grow Ohio Valley. Grow Ohio Valley is what I've been working on for more or less the last 10 years. Well, here, let's dive right into it. What is Grow Ohio Valley? I'm going to take this presentation in two parts. We're going to start with why are we doing this? What are the problems that we see with our community, in our community, and what are the benefits of instigating a local food economy? And then we're going to talk about how Grow Ohio Valley has set up its company architecture to address those problems and seek a better way, a better vision. So here we go. Our mission statement is to achieve regional food sovereignty. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Our vision is to build a regional food system in which farmers flourish and local and healthy food is a way of life. These are highly living mission and vision statements. If you were in the room 5 minutes ago, we were just debating some word changes in there. So anyway, if you have any ideas, fly them at me. What is food sovereignty? Food sovereignty is the right of peoples to define their own food and agricultural systems. There's a little bit more nuance in there. That's really what we're going for here in the Upper Ohio Valley of Wheeling. And why are we doing that? This is what we're up to. We're trying to build viable year-round economic outlets for farmers and food producers, nutritious food accessibility, and food spending that stays in the local economy. I'm flying a little bit through this, so if anybody wants to hang on a slide for a second, just pop your hand up and ask a question or keep me on it. I only have 20 minutes, and this is probably a 45-minute presentation, so I'm trying to be snappy. Is Wheeling food secure? We're 20% above the national average. The national average is that 12.5% of people in Wheeling are food insecure. In Wheeling, it's 20% above that. We have 73,000 plus people living in an hour of drive who are defined, this is by the USDA, as food insecure. What is hunger? Again, just plowing through this stuff. Hunger isn't, the hunger that we saw 100 years ago, or that we see in the third world now. Hunger is something different in Wheeling, and it has, in the developed world at large. Hunger has more to do with the quality of food than the quantity of food. So we have, people with plenty to eat, but are still starving from the lack of nutrient density in their food. What is nutrient density? Nutrient density is just a ratio of vitamins and minerals over calories, right? So you have, Wonder Bread. Very few vitamins and minerals, a whole bunch of calories, scores low. You have a stalk of celery, tons of vitamins and minerals, very few calories, scores high. So nutrient density, or the lack thereof, in the food that's produced and distributed in our present food system is leading to high levels of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, arthritis, diabetes. All of these things have public health implications, and as we know, public health implications lead directly to economic implications, which is really what we're about here today, right? So, why are we declining in nutritional value? Why is our food declining in nutritional value? The average piece of food on your plate, maybe even here today, was traveled 1,500 miles to get here. Why does that matter? Spinach loses 90% of its vitamin C within 24 hours of harvest. This is across the board. This isn't unique to spinach. Food, from the time you pick it, starts losing its nutritional value. The home garden is really the best way to capture nutrients. And then a localized food economy contributes to that as well. Also, we're finding something that's pretty interesting that we'll touch more on in a few minutes, which is that food produced, generally speaking, irregardless of how far it traveled to get to your plate, is losing nutrient density. And that's a result of soil. So the mineral composition of your soil has a direct impact on the mineral composition of the food, right? The things in the food can only come from the soil that it was grown in. And there's many contributors to soil science that indicate that as you properly minerally balance your soil, you end up with food that has dramatically different nutritional values, including a head of broccoli that can have almost zero protein to a head of broccoli that's grown in optimally minerally balanced soil can have as much protein by weight as a T-bone steak, right? Sorry for the vegetarians in the room. But come on, let's replace those T-bones with broccoli. So this is all university research. This is coming out of ag universities. This isn't, kind of left-wing propaganda. So, and it's an economic decision ultimately. When you can produce that broccoli, you can produce broccoli that looks like broccoli that you buy at Kroger. You can produce that without properly minerally balancing your soil, and it's a diminishing rate of returns that's experienced in the economic picture of agriculture. So you do this minimal mineralization of your soil that's required to produce the broccoli that you can sell for $1. You don't get any additional value. You don't get any additional sales dollar out of growing broccoli that has a higher level of vitamin C and iron and vitamin A. Right? You get no extra money for that. You get the same amount of money when you go to sell that broccoli on the shelf at Kroger. So what is a food system where nutrient density is truly valued? Where is a food system where farmers can be relied upon and be supported in building high quality minerally balanced soils with high levels of soil organic matter? Boy, we could geek out on that all day long. How do we get that happening? And the way to do that is when farmers know their communities, right? When farmers' kids are the ones who are eating the food, or farmers' nephews, or farmers' own communities are participating in that. That's how we can build a system where nutrient density is truly valued. I'm getting some time indications, so I'm going to go a little bit faster here. Also, farms are in decline, as we know. Many of you probably paid close attention to the farm crisis in the 1980s. Things haven't changed much. So where do we go from here? I'm going to read this out loud because I think it's a powerful statement. For Appalachia to truly thrive, we must recognize the interconnections among the health of our population, support for regional farmers, and a flourishing local economy. There is major untapped potential in local food. We were just talking about the challenge of combating the statements that that the cracker plant will bring $30 billion of economic development and hundreds of thousands of jobs. What do we do? What's the way to answer that? An answer for that is a diversified economy, and I think that food is a really important part of that, including a recent report that stated that shifting just 10% of Wheeling's annual food spending to local food, just 10%, would inject $35 million into the local food economy. There's a really interesting report published fairly recently on that. You can make it available to any of you. Just come grab me after the presentation and I'll point you towards it. Also, in Wheeling, many of us have probably noticed something that as bright young people come of age, they leave. They go somewhere else. They head off to WVU or one of the other big universities, and then off into the world of opportunity that's not to be found here in Wheeling. I often joke that I'm the only person who grew up in Morgantown and ended up living in Wheeling, although there's some other examples now. So this quote speaks to that. How can building this system that's exciting and full of opportunity contribute to keeping our kids here, and living their adult lives here. Okay, so now stepping into Grow Ohio Valley's architecture, how do we formulate ourselves as a company in order to try to address these problems and instigate change? And really it's three parts. We have the three-legged milking stool of Grow Ohio Valley. The first leg being our food hub. Our food hub is, I'm just going to talk about a food hub in a really reductionist, simplified sense, which is, imagine that there is a school that needs 1,000 pounds of tomatoes a week. This is a big school. There are no farmers around who can grow 1,000 pounds of tomatoes a week, but there may be 10 farmers who can each grow 100 pounds of tomatoes a week. The basic function of a food hub is to aggregate the food from those 10 farmers. It's to be a tool for those farmers to aggregate their food, bring it together, and then be able to score that contract with the public school. Does that make sense? So basically you're giving the power to reach into larger institutional markets or commodity markets for small-scale growers. That's the concept of a food hub. Highly oversimplified. Ours is that with a few other layers, which we can talk through, which is 2 essential activities: generating market opportunities for a network of farmers. That's what I just mentioned with the public schools. That's actually a real example. And expanding food access and eliminating food deserts. There's structural piece of community food system development that I feel and our company feels very strong about, which is that a community that reaches towards a strong food system can only do so if it's done in an equitable and just way that includes communities that are traditionally left out of healthy food systems. Here in Wheeling, what are those communities? It's more or less the urban core: East Wheeling, South Wheeling, Wheeling Island. These neighborhoods where there is no grocery store within a mile of where the vast majority of people live. There's convenience stores that don't have high quality produce. There's me living on 15th Street, right on the alley where people walk to get to convenient or Neely's every day. And you see kids walking down the alley, 5 o'clock in the evening, they're hungry, and then they come back a half hour and they have, what do they have? They have Doritos, a Slim Jim, and a Mountain Dew. What's it? What's that? Hot Flamings, that's right, that sounds dangerous. So, it's like, okay, and then I worked at the Laughlin Chapel for 7 years. This is a youth center in East Wheeling, and 80% of the kids at the time that I worked there at the Laughlin Chapel were diagnosed with behavioral disorders. 80%, it's 4 out of 5 kids. Okay, this isn't genetic. Laughlin Chapel is a cross-section of all kinds of kids, that are coming from all different neighborhoods across Wheeling. Why is it that 4 out of 5 kids are diagnosed with a behavioral disorder? Well, I'd have a behavioral disorder too if I was living my life on Mountain Dew and Slim Jims and Doritos. Okay, so that's an important component of our food hub, is making opportunities and cultural norms in these communities, making them available and present and accessible to people. So as such, I'm going to flip through quickly here, we have a mobile farmers market. This is basically like the ice cream truck, except it has vegetables. That's running, it'll start up in about a month here, and it runs 6 days a week, all through the summer to all day long to 20 plus locations, mostly focused on housing projects and senior citizen high-rise buildings. Places where people have limited mobility and lack of access to healthy, high-quality food. We have a pharmacy program. This is a fun one to talk about. As we start to talk about I mentioned earlier on, how do we formulate a diversified economy that integrates sectors to build a groundswell of change and economic opportunity. Thank you. So this is really exciting. This is a cross-sectoral piece of work that involves healthcare and farmers. That's the pharmacy with an F, if you can read that sign down at the bottom. And the idea there is that people with diet-related health diseases are given healthy food throughout the summer and are taught how to use it. These are people with chronic diabetes for the most part. That's the primary focus. So what we're seeing, just by bringing people with diabetes, this is type 2 diabetes, into a program and giving them healthy food for 15 weeks of the summer and teaching them how to use it. Also, there's a critical component, which is their physician is telling them to eat it as part of their healthcare plan. People's healthcare metrics, their health metrics are changing dramatically, including average drop in A1C score for diabetic people of 0.6 points. You see some numbers up there that may look kind of confusing. Really what it boils down to, it costs $500 to deliver this program, and you could see up to $5,000 in savings, healthcare savings, from people's healthcare improvement. Okay, that's a pretty good pitch for this program. How can we get insurance companies to buy this program and to start giving people healthy food instead of paying for them to be sick? Maybe more importantly, though, is in a broader stroke kind of way, is that food has an incredible ripple effect. It's like a foundational starting point for health in our community that gives us. It's the lack of high quality in food contributes to West Virginia having the worst job market participation rate in America. We have, of our working age adults, we have the lowest participation in the workforce. Why is that? It's health. That's just what it is. There's so many people who are disabled or in poor health in West Virginia that we don't have a workforce. Okay, so there's many statistics like that across the board. This program starts to hint at a way to chip away at that, to make strategic and meaningful partnerships between the food sector and the healthcare sector to improve the health in our community in such a way that will have a big and lasting impact on our local economy. A few other things, just flipping through the programs that we run out of our food hub. This is a CSA program where you can sign up at the beginning of the year and you get a box of food once a week all through the summer. And there's a whole spectrum of way of how people can participate in that, including people who pay full price and people who we subsidize and get them the food for free or at reduced cost. A lot of our food ends up in soup kitchens through some kind of creative philanthropy. And we have farm to school. This one's pretty exciting. That's getting food that's ready to be served in institutional cafeterias, taken from farmers' fields, processing it however the institutional cafeteria requires, and then getting it into these cafeterias. Schools are pretty fun because every farmer wants to grow food for the kids in their community. It's like, go find any farmer and say, who would you like to see eating your food? And it's kids. It's like farmers don't make the choice to be farmers because they want to get rich. They make the choice to be farmers because they want to contribute to food production. They want to be doing something meaningful. It's a mission-driven group of people, often grumpy and cantankerous, but very mission-driven. So farm to school, that's a big initiative of Grow Ohio Valley, is to start switching the food that our kids eat in our public school systems from stuff that's imported on a distributor's truck to stuff that was grown in our community. This is maybe the biggest initiative that Grow Ohio Valley has tackled yet. And it's the same thing. It has the dual mission of generating opportunities for farmers while increasing food access in the urban core of Wheeling. That's the public market. The public market, it's an intervention into Wheeling's food system. This is the concept here of the public market is a year-round farmers market that's based on a consignment model, wherein farmers deliver their food to the public market and retain ownership of that product until the end user purchases it. It's just like a consignment clothing store. Raise your hand if you've ever been to a consignment store for clothing. Okay, great, almost everybody in the room. Same idea. The farmer drops off their food, they set their price, they arrange it on the shelf, and then they go home and get back to farming or whatever else they go to their kids' ball game or whatever they were up to. Instead of sitting there and having to hawk their own food, we're just providing a platform for that sale. So the public market would retain 20 to 30% of the sales dollar in order to keep the lights on and keep the staff paid, and the lion's share of the sale then goes back to the farmer. We're seeing this, well, for one, there are several examples across West Virginia and the region of ways that this has impacted and even revolutionized food economies, including the Wild Ramp in Huntington, West Virginia, and Local Roots in Wooster, Ohio. These big dollar amount returns to local farmers that then in turn spurs entrepreneurial activity. It gets farmers to hire more people to work on their farms. So you're talking jobs, you're talking business development, and you're talking breaking through a food desert in an urban area and injecting healthy food right into the urban core. Public market will offer all kinds of local food. It will have a deli that features locally sourced food, all kinds of natural and healthy products like bulk nuts and grains and spices and so forth, and specialty foods otherwise not available in the area. And a full slate of educational programming. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in just a minute. How am I doing on time? Okay, not great. So let's I'm going to interpret that hand motion. Okay, here we go. This was in Huntington. Huntington, once called America's fattest city, was now named America's best community. And a year-round farmers market, a place where people can get healthy food, participate in it year-round, and where farmers can sell healthy food year-round, had a huge impact on moving the needle in Huntington. That's something we want to replicate here in Wheeling. Oh, geez, how can I do this? Can I have 5 minutes? Is that all right? Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, so we farm at Grow Ohio Valley also. Now we're getting into the second leg of our company's architecture, which is our farms fill in gaps in local food production. So basically we look at it like this. We look at our demand for locally grown food, and then we look at what other producers can do, and we fill in the gap. Is that making sense? So it's only a tool to make sure that as Grow Ohio Valley is creating these new market outlets, make sure that we're able to provide customer service to those outlets, to make sure that when we start the public market, there's going to be locally grown lettuce on the shelves. And we'll grow that food. We'll take the risk of growing that food and entering these new unstable markets. We'll take on that risk, and as we prove these markets and prove that the sales can be there for farmers, and farmers want to grow into those sales opportunities, we'll get out of the way. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So how do we do that farming? We have some urban farms, including Farm 18. This is all about 3 miles that way in downtown Wheeling. This is kind of under the highway. It's a little bit less than 1 acre of intensive food production on a vacant lot that used to have houses on it that were torn down in the late 70s. We have Lincoln Meadows Farm. This is, again, where Lincoln Homes used to be up on the hill in downtown Wheeling. Lincoln Homes being a housing project that was torn down in the 90s. We got a lease on it from the Housing Authority and built a couple of greenhouses and have been churning out cucumbers and tomatoes for the most part out of this parcel. And we've also planted an orchard. This is 350 apple trees up on the Wheeling Jesuit facing side of Vineyard Hill. You can actually see it from here. They're just you won't be able to tell what you're looking at, but you can see the orchard from Wheeling Jesuit's campus. Also, we have a whole bunch of educational programs. These are things, if we want to get our community participating in this food, you can almost think of it as long-term marketing, right? If you want to get Wheeling as a whole to have this behavioral shift towards buying and eating healthy food, especially healthy food that was grown by local farmers, we need to be getting to people early. So we do a lot of programs in schools, including reverse field trips, Sprout. You can imagine how these things go. They're food literacy, teaching kids what vegetables are. You'd be amazed as how many kids think that potatoes grow on a tree, for example. Teaching these kids what this food is, how they can cook it, how they can eat it. So we do a lot of cooking classes. This one here is a cooking class in Madison School over on Wheeling Island. And we also do some adult-focused cooking classes, including this one, Cooking on a Budget, which was teaching. This one was geared at single mothers. How do you get food cheap that was grown by local farmers? That's buying unprocessed foods, and then prepare them into crock pot friendly meals. So you can throw some food in the crock pot at the beginning of the day and then have it ready for you when you get home from work. We do some immersion trips. This is very similar to what the Appalachian Institute does, in which we bring college students in. They spend an entire week in immersion with Grow Ohio Valley, learning about food systems and how they can go back to their home communities and start moving the needle on the way food is produced and consumed. Farmers using non-GMO that are involved with us and raising organic crops. All of them are using non-GMO, so yes to that, no to organic. We have many growers who are using something else that's called integrated pest management. That's where it's a much more intelligent approach that allows for the use of synthetic chemicals, but it involves an analytical process for bug life cycles and understanding what are ways that you can use those synthetic chemicals minimally at certain points in pest life cycles or in disease life cycles. Everything that Grow Ohio Valley does is organic, but we're working with a lot of growers who aren't. It's a touchy one. It's kind of that are we crusading for organic or not? Definitely we want to see organic, and it's our belief that in food sovereignty, in a truly locally based food economy, farmers are going to naturally trend towards sustainable and organic methods of production because they're feeding their own kids. It's no farmer wants their kid to be eating crops that have 2,4-D residue on them. It's just everyone. You wear a bodysuit when you spray that stuff. It's pretty obvious the impacts that it can have on health. So you see folks trending towards organic and sustainable, and the more local you get in a food system. So that's been our approach, is to emphasize the localization of a food economy as opposed to the move towards organic certifications. And we're seeing that the trend is that people are moving that direction anyway. Yeah. It's true. We do a lot of our work in Madison Elementary School. There was 1 week last year where 4 kids lost parents to overdose, and that's it's across the board. We have really high incidence of child abuse, physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. And you look at these things. Obviously, these things have repercussions throughout life. 2 things to say to that: we have a really interesting program called Operation TP, which is focused on kids who have a high level of adverse childhood experience or trauma. Wherein we get them outside for an entire day, get them exposed to nutrition, to outdoor education, and to mindfulness. And we've seen some really cool results from that. That's in partnership with Glynis Board. She's a local reporter who's doing some her graduate school work around kids and trauma. and how food and nature can have an impact on that. Also, there's some really interesting stuff out there on how high quality food can have an impact on recovery from trauma and recovery from opioid abuse. Including very simple statistics like if you introduce healthy food and healthy eating into an opioid recovery program, you can see 40 to 50% increase in people sticking to the program. Yeah. Yes.